Good evening. So when I was in school, I guess I'm still in school, but when I was going to school, we would, have the homecoming days. We'd do the 60s or the 70s, and students wear poodle skirts or whatever, bell bottoms or whatever, and that was fun. So the other day, the students brought me this list of days they wanted to celebrate, and so one of them was called Throwback Days, and I said, so what's a throwback day? And they said, we want to celebrate and we want to dress like they did in the 90s. And I realized I was getting a little older. That's a great question. My dad's probably still wearing what he wore in the 90s, so I'm glad to be here tonight and glad you're here. We're going to jump in. There's so much to cover, but before we do, let's have a quick prayer. Look, I know it's Wednesday night. I know you're tired. Everybody is probably wore out except for Jason White. My parents live next door to him. I promise you, he'll mow at midnight. I'll look over and be like, what is that guy doing? And they're like, Jason, he's mowing. It's usual. So everybody else who's on a normal sleep pattern, I know, right, you're there. But look, there's some exciting things in Joshua. I love the character of Joshua, the man of Joshua. We're going to look a little bit at the book of Joshua, and I'm going to move quick tonight. I do want to, if you have a question, but there's a lot of things here, and I found so much information and things that I want to share tonight, and so I want to jump right in. But before we do, what do we need to pray about? I know Kimberly's your aunt passed away, and so let's remember that family. Who else do we need to remember? I don't know if we're glad Butch is back, but we're definitely glad Paula's back, and so Butch kind of comes with a package. But no, I'm glad to see Butch and Paula. I still don't understand exactly how they're figuring that out, but they just kind of hold each other and fall towards the seats, and so they're making it work. But I tell you one thing I'm so thankful for is my immediate family. And so, sometimes people at work or other things, they're trying to have to figure somebody out to go take them somewhere and all that. And isn't it great when you do have either biological family or church family, when those times when you just need help and need somebody to take care of you, and the Whites are a great example of taking care of one another and doing that. And that's a great time when the church can step in as well. I know many of us have experienced that, and it's hard. But sometimes it's our turn, and sometimes it's the turn. I have a coworker, Molly knows her well, and every time something will happen, and she'll say, well, I would help you, but y'all Church of Christ folks, y'all got people that are going to do that. And I'm good with that, and she knows that, we're going to take care of one another, so I think that's a good thing to have said about us. All right, what else do we need to pray about? I never have heard of that. I'm kind of processing that, but okay. All right. Remember Grandma Cherry? Grandma is doing amazingly well for 89, but her heart is not been in rhythm for a little while, and so they're trying different things, but they're going to do some more. I don't know how to say that. I guess more extensive things in a few weeks if things don't change quickly. And so the good thing is she's about as good a health as you can be for 89. The bad thing is she's 89. So please be praying for her. And it's amazing what she can still do. What else? Anybody? James, do you mind saying that?
Father, we pray that you'll be with us through our study this evening. We pray that you'll help us to
anything that, that we have trouble tonight with or that can't be answered, since James always does it to us, I'm going to make sure he gets asked those questions. So I'm going to put him on the spot a little bit tonight. So we're going to jump right in. The verses that I was given tonight are Hebrews 11, 29, and 30. So let's turn there real quick. Hebrews 11, 29, and 30. The people of Israel had faith, so they passed through the Red Sea. They went through it as if it were dry land. The Egyptians tried to do it also, but they drowned. Israel's army had faith, so the walls of Jericho fell down. It happened after they had marched around the city for 7 days. So my topic was Joshua and the people of Israel, and so there's a lot in those two verses. I'm going to try not to step too much on maybe the lessons that come after me, but I do want to talk about Joshua, and I want to talk about some things we can learn from the book of Joshua. So if you'll turn over to Joshua, we're gonna run through some things really quickly. So Joshua chapter 1, 5 through 8. So if you want to jot these down, I want to give you some secrets to success. Some secrets to success. Pulling from a different bunch. I'm pulling from a plethora of sources tonight, and want to share again some thoughts with you. So these are going to be short, succinct, but secrets to success. Joshua 1, 5 through 8. I'm going to read until I can't see anymore, and then I'll start asking you to read. Joshua, no one will be able to oppose you as long as you live. I will be with you, just as I was with Moses. I will never leave you. I will never desert you. Be strong and brave. You will lead these people. They will take the land as their very own. It is the land I promised to give their people of long ago. Be strong and very brave. Make sure you obey the whole law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn away from it to the right or the left. Then you will have success everywhere you go. Never stop reading this book of the law. Day and night you must think about what it says. Make sure you do everything written in it. Then things will go well with you, and you will have great success. So number one, what do you think the secret to success is? So Joshua has they've come, right? They were in the desert for 40 years, and Moses doesn't get to cross over into the land, and so now Joshua is becoming the leader of several million people at this point. Depending on what you read, could be 2 million, could be 6 million. Let's just say it is a large group of people, and they're going to go and they're going to take over this land. It's going to be difficult. Joshua, remember, with Caleb, has already seen at least some of the area that they're supposed to conquer. But the biggest thing is he's lost Moses. I mean, Moses has led these people, and Joshua took care and protected in many ways Moses and helped Moses and learned from Moses. But now he's going to be gone. And Joshua is going to cross the river, and he's going to look back, and Moses is not going to be with him. But Joshua can't worry about that because he's got several million people that he's got to lead through this land so they can take it as God has commanded them to do. And so I think the first key to success here is to be obedient to God, just to be obedient. What do you think Joshua is thinking about as he's about to take on this role? Or maybe what would be going through your mind? Am I as good as Moses? I mean, like, if you got to compare yourself to somebody, I mean, Moses literally, like, was with God, right? And spent time with God to the point of he's glowing. And I mean, like, he was close. And now you got to take his spot. And he's seen some amazing things that Moses was able to do. Moses did that for a long time. And now Joshua is going to be given this responsibility. He probably saw what it did to Moses in many ways too, and the stress of that and having to handle that. And so now he's going to have to take on that responsibility. That's a good one. What else? Am I up to this challenge? What's going to happen? Some people are probably going to die along this journey, as they already have in the desert. And so hopefully there's going to be victories, but there's also going to be difficult things. Molly? Okay. All right, definitely. I love where he says, don't turn to the left or the right. Make sure you do everything written in it, then things will go well with you. Just follow what the law says. Just follow the law I've given you. Just follow me. And so all along the way, at every battle, at every challenge, Joshua's going to have to make the decision, I've got to follow God. But that doesn't mean it's always going to be easy, and sometimes I think we take that for granted. And so as we go through these, I want to also, I want you to think about your life. I don't know of any of us that are going to be leading 6 million people anytime soon. But what if you're asked to lead something here at church? It's easy sometimes to say, well, the last person that did that was really good. Am I going to live up to that? Well, in your family, sometimes it's hard. Like, do I feel like I am the parent that I need to be? Do I feel like I'm the spouse that I need to be? And as we face things in our life, do we feel that we're adequate? Do we feel that we're capable? Do we feel like we're the best one for that job? And yet God says, hey, are you going to take care of the things where you're at? Are you going to lead where you're at? New experiences can be frightening, but with God leading our lives, these challenges can be thrilling and rewarding. And so sometimes we look at those negative things, but at the same time, Joshua is the chosen leader. He's Moses and God, have enough faith in Joshua that he can do this task. And so in some ways, that has to also be comforting to him, that he's been given this task. So the first one, key to success, be obedient. Number 2, I'm not going to read this whole section, but Joshua 2, 1 through 14, if you want to look at that. So this is one of the, I don't want to, is somebody got Rahab next week? Okay. We're just going to mention this briefly, and I'm going to move on, because there's a lot here, and again, somebody has that next week. Okay. So Cliff will fix anything I mess up. But in the story of Rahab, obviously we know what's happening there at Jericho. Rahab ends up being a help. So it's before we move to the next one, what can we learn from that story of Rahab? Okay, all right. I just want to make this point, secret to success. God can use anybody. Sometimes we've had things happen in our lives, we've had issues, we've had problems, we've made mistakes, and sometimes because of that, we don't feel adequate. I can imagine Rahab at many times didn't feel adequate. And even as she joins the people of Israel, are there people saying things, are there people that treat her differently? And yet she's mentioned in these scriptures about people of faith. And I think it's a good reminder for us that God can use anybody. And I believe God even uses people who aren't Christians sometimes to do some pretty amazing things. And I'm not going to discount that. And so are we treating people in that way? That they have a purpose, that they can be an ally? Are we treating people in a way that they still matter, no matter what they've been through, no matter what they've done, no matter where they're at? And are we giving them time to grow like people have given us time to grow? All right, number 3, Joshua 3, 9 through 17. Joshua 3, 9 through 17. I am going to read this section. Joshua said to the Israelites, "Come here, listen to what the Lord your God is saying. You will soon know that the living God is among you. He will certainly drive out the people now living in the land. He'll do it to make room for you. He'll drive out the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Gerashites, Amorites, and Jebusites. The ark will go into the Jordan River ahead of you. It's the ark of the covenant of the Lord of the whole earth. Choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel. Choose one from each tribe. The priest will carry the ark of the Lord. He is the Lord of the whole earth. As soon as the priests step into the Jordan, it will stop flowing. The water that's coming down the river will pile up in one place. That's how you will know that the living God is among you. So the people took their tents down. They prepared to cross the Jordan. The priest carrying the ark of the covenant went ahead of them. The water of the Jordan was going over its banks. It always does that at the time the crops are being gathered. The priests came to the river. Their feet touched the water's edge. Right away, the water coming down the river stopped flowing. And you can read the rest of that there. And so this is one of the specific things that's mentioned in Hebrews 11, 29, and 30. So I had done some study on this before. What's amazing is I've been to the Mississippi, so I've seen a big river. But around here, like the Forked Deer, right? So apparently at one time, they used the Forked Deer to transport things all over the place, and it was kind of known for that. If you go to the Forked Deer now, I've never been to an area where I didn't think I could get across it. I guess it's filled in and all that. And so when I think of the Jordan River, sometimes I have this idea of a Forked Deer-sized river in mind. And when you think of it that way, it's not as impressive. But if you read some about the Jordan is a major river, especially at that time. But it also has, in many places, most places, very steep banks. And so as they're preparing to go down, they're carrying the Ark of the Covenant. I don't remember offhand exactly how much it weighed, but remember it was inlaid with gold, right? It's very heavy. It takes several people to carry it. I want to say 1,500 pounds, but I may be off on that. Anybody remember? It's very heavy. So as they're going down a bank, so think of the Mississippi in some places, but as they're going down in the bank of the banks with that much weight, once they hit the water, there is no turning back. What happens? You're carrying the ark. You're not going to just shift that weight real quick and turn around and come out of the water. So once you've hit the water, you're in. So either the water divides and you go across, or you drown. So once you've made that decision, you're there. Again, also you have several million people who are going to be crossing this. Also, is this the same group that crossed the Red Sea? No. Other than a few, right? They had not seen that. They'd heard about it. And so this is going to be new for them. So they get to the edge of this river, and they've got to make a decision. Talks about the water literally stopping and piling up to make way for them. There's been suggestions such as an earthquake happened and made like a natural dam where they could cross. But at the end of the day, God made a way where there wasn't a way. How do we know that it was impressive? How do we know that it was impressive?
The town of Adam is 10 miles above.
Okay.
So that wasn't just a little bitty
All right.
there, it was 10 miles above them.
What happened as they traveled through the land of Canaan?
People heard about it.
So other people have heard about it. How did this big of a group, get across in the time frame they did? Well, they had heard what happened. It's an impressive feat. One thing I don't want us to forget at Crosswinds is I don't want us to forget, if we're willing, God will make a way. Look, COVID was a rough time, not just for us, but for a lot of people. Sickness sometimes is tough. Sometimes we lose people that it's like, why did God allow that to happen? That person was really doing a lot of good. And sometimes those things, I went to the funeral today of a 29-year-old girl that was in my youth group a few years ago, and had some degenerative things she was born with, and just her body couldn't take it anymore. It's hard to understand. But I don't want us to ever in our lives and as a church get to a point where we don't think there's a way. If we believe, if we're willing to obey, God will make a way. Israel comes to this river. God's going to give us this land. Joshua and Caleb have come back and told us that we can conquer this, even though the other 10 didn't seem to think so. But how do we get across this river? And so the people had to make a decision. to follow the priest, and the priests ultimately, I guess, are the first line there. They've got to decide as they take that Ark of the Covenant to step into that water. When does the water separate?
That's the cool thing about the story. The water doesn't part until
Yeah.
they touch it. And so, I always picture like it's dividing and then they walk. It doesn't touch. It doesn't divide until their feet touch the water.
Right.
And so, I've been thinking a lot about this verse John 11:40 when Jesus raises Lazarus and Mary and Martha are talking to him beforehand, and Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see?" So we always say seeing is believing. Jesus says believing is seeing. So if you believe it, then you will see it. And it's the same thing here. If you believe that that water is going to part, then you will see it. And so they had to believe it before they even started walking down there.
Yeah.
They had to believe that it was going to happen because it didn't part until they touched it.
And think of,
That's just, that's really a lot of faith.
and as every person crosses that river, they have to make the decision. I'm either crossing, but I don't also know when this water is going to, come back over this area. So I'm in or I'm out. And you get to the halfway point. Am I going to continue on this route? And so the people that day, but think of it also as this is a test for them. They're about to go and they're going to have to face, city after city after city as they take this land. If they're not even willing to follow God to cross this river, how in the world are they going? They're not a trained army. They've been roaming in the desert for 40 years. They can survive a long time, but can they fight? And so this is a good test for them. Are they ready to do what God asked them to do? And God, in an amazing way, rewards them when they are willing to follow. Number 4, and we won't go into the whole story, but Joshua 6, 1 through 5, story of Jericho. Again, God makes a way when it doesn't seem like there's a way. But more importantly here, I think the lesson we need to remember from the story of Jericho is sometimes God's instructions don't make sense. I used to think I had it pretty much figured out, right? I used to be a little more black and white. Some things I still am. But as I've aged a little bit, as had more life experiences, some things are just tough. And you read something and you go, I see that a little different now because I've got some experience behind that. I've seen some things. But sometimes things just don't make sense. She's not here tonight. So I've got an 18-year-old home. And, man, she's got it all figured out. And sometimes it gets so frustrating because I want to say, hey, Lily, when I was talking to you about the ACT, I may not know everything about everything, but I do have a doctorate in education. I do work at a school every day. And so I know a little bit about at least this subject. Applying for college and things, and scholarships. So, like Lily, this is what I do every day. This is my job. Like, this is my area of expertise. Plumbing, not so much. Carpentry, not so much. But I can help you in this area. But sometimes she just has to do it her way. Sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't. But aren't we all that way sometimes? I hope that I'm becoming a better husband because sometimes I want to do it my way, and I don't listen very well. The other day at work, the guidance counselor who's a female, one of my assistant principals who's a female, came into my office, and they were talking about something. And I stopped, and I said, Miss Yarbrough, can I ask you a question? Sure, Miss Lewis. So in communicating with my wife, I've learned this, and I want to ask you, are you asking me to fix this, or are you just asking me to listen to you? And she said, actually, I just want you to listen today, Miss Lewis. I really appreciate that, though. So that's one thing I don't always do, but I'm trying to learn, right? And so we grow and we develop and we change. And yet sometimes God's words or instructions don't make sense. And we've got to decide, are we going to follow them? Are we going to do what he asks? The Israelites are walking around Jericho, and I'm sure some of them are wondering, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? Surely there's a better way to go about this. And again, I think this is part of that process. As they go through this land, are they willing to follow God's instructions? Are we willing to follow God's instruction in how we treat our families and how we treat our spouse and how we interact with church? It's hard to go to somebody, another church member sometime, and talk about an issue we might have or do that, right? But God's word lays out how we're supposed to do that. And so I think it's important to remember to follow God's instructions even when they don't make sense. Number 5, Joshua 8, 1 through 4. Let's read that. Joshua 8, 1 through 4. Then the Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid, do not lose hope. Go up and attack Ai. Take the whole army with you. I have handed the king of Ai over to you. I have given you his people, his city, and his land. Remember what you did to Jericho and its king. And Jericho was a large city compared to Ai. You remember what you did to Jericho and its king. You will do the same thing to Ai and its king. But this time you can keep for yourselves the livestock and everything else you take from them. Have some of your fighting men hide behind the city and take them by surprise. They go, they attack the city. He takes 30,000 of his best fighting men, and then they get chased away, and several men get killed at the city of Ai after they had defeated this large city of Jericho. We'll learn more in just a minute of why that happens. But I don't think anybody's covering Achan, but you got the story of Achan, right? And there's sin in the camp. God had already told him, like, you can defeat this, you can do this. It's already a done deal. Listen carefully to what I'm saying. You must hide behind the city. Don't go very far from it. You must be ready to attack it. They go through this process, and yet they end up losing. And it's a good lesson about Joshua also. What happens? What does Joshua do? What does Joshua do after this defeat? Do you remember? Look down. All right, yeah, I'm trying to find the exact verse, but he's basically in distress. God, how have you brought us this far? How have you brought us? We've conquered Jericho, and now we've lost men at this village, this place of Ai.
7 verse 6.
Thank you. All right, yeah, 7 verse 6. We're talking about Achan's sin. So Joshua here is in distress. This is early in the journey. They got a long way to go to do what God has asked them to do, and Joshua is struggling here. God, I thought I was doing what you asked. And I think it's important to remember that everybody's got to be on board. Now, that doesn't take away my personal responsibility, but part of the church is that we're responsible for each other, right? And that we have a collective responsibility as well. And so the nation of Israel here struggles, and some men lose their lives because of Achan's sin, and so Joshua has to deal with that. But it's also a lesson for Joshua, and a hard lesson learned as he has to deal with this problem. But ultimately, is he going to continue to follow God, or is he going to let it turn them from their path? Joshua 9, 1 through 21.
Nathan, on that one, the last one, that's what I'd be thinking if I was Joshua and Moses is gone, is are they going to listen to him?
Okay, right. Yeah.
They listen to Moses, not all the time, but now Moses is gone, and are they going to listen to him? And they didn't. I don't know why this one guy didn't, but that's what I would do. If I've been in issues, that's what I'd do.
All right. Okay, yeah. It's, again, a large group of people. And so he's going to constantly face that. We're not going to look a lot here, but chapter 9, 1 through 21, talking about the people of Gibeon. They deceive God's people. The Israelites erred in not asking the Lord if they should make the treaty. Joshua and the Israelites had to live with the consequences of their rash promise. Are we listening to God before we make decisions? One of the hardest things about the job I do is I have to make a lot of decisions, and I'm supposed to make them quick often just to keep things moving. And sometimes that's difficult because I don't have the time that I would like to really think those through. Now, some things I'll put on hold, so I do have time to think about them. But when it comes to things that are of great importance, especially spiritual matters, are we taking time to process those? Are we taking time to talk through those? Are we taking time to read God's word, to pray about it before we make those decisions? Are we just making a decision to move on? And so I think it's important for us to remember that. In Israel, often when they made a quick decision, they paid the consequence. Joshua 10, 12 through 14. Joshua 10 through 12 through 14. So the Lord gave the Amorites over to the tribe of Manasseh. He gave it to, I think it's page 2. Yeah, there we go. Israel. On that day, Joshua spoke to the Lord while the Israelites were listening. He said, sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, stand still over the valley of Ajalon. So the sun stood still, the moon stopped. They didn't move again until the nation won the battle over its enemies. And this is one of those things that really can't be explained. Some people have, talked about there possibly being some kind of eclipse of some kind, but it talks about the day being lengthened. This extra daylight that was given. God, over and over and over throughout the story of Israel, shows care for his people, even when they mess up. He sent the manna. He sent the quail. He sent the water. He constantly is taking care of them. Talks about their clothes not wearing out in the desert. And then as they go through again, they're not a fighting force. Now, they're a large group of people, but they're not a trained military. And yet, over and over and over, they're able to conquer these different cities as they go throughout the land. And God is constantly showing different care for them. And here, at Joshua's request, he even extends this day. Joshua 14, 6 through 12. Joshua 14, 6 through 12. Again, you had Joshua and Caleb that went into the land. God promised Caleb a special place in Canaan, and I think somebody else has Caleb. That's an interesting story. So this is 45 years later. Caleb steps up to remind Joshua of the Lord's promise about the land, and they've got to divide that. And I won't get into that too much because somebody else has Caleb. Joshua 15, 1 through 12. Now you're getting into where they're dividing up the borders of each tribe, and so the people know what their responsibility is. What do you think's possible here when you're dividing up this land? They've all conquered it. What's going to come up, you think? Well, we want the area with the river. We want the area with the pasture. We have a larger group, and so it would be easy for there to be quibbling, for there to be arguing, for there to be disagreements. And so Joshua's got to lead the people through that. Ultimately, what is their responsibility? Are they going to follow what God has laid out? And so Joshua has to make sure they do that. Joshua 17, 14 through 18 talks about Manasseh being given fertile land. Often we waste time inventing reasons why we can't do something, but we can be certain God will never ask us to do something without giving us the resources to get it done. And so sometimes there's something that needs to be done. There's something that needs to be taken care of, and we can come up with a lot of reasons why we don't want to do it or why it can't be done. But if it's something that needs to be done, or we finding a way to make that happen, I think Mission Sunday will be a good day for us to show that we believe God can do some pretty amazing things. And we'll read this one, Joshua 19, 47 through 48. Will somebody read that? Joshua 19, 47 and 48. So what happens here? So they've conquered the land, they've divided the land up. But what's happened to Dan here, the tribe of Dan? They're having trouble holding on to what the land is theirs. They're in danger of losing that. Sometimes I think we get to a point where we think we've arrived. Maybe that's in our family, maybe that's in our church family. Hey, we're there, we're doing what God wants us to do, we've done what he's asked. And you may have heard it like this: it's somebody else's turn to help with the youth. I've done my time with that. And I get, like, I'm here to say my days of not sleepovers, that sounds weird, but lock-ins. My days of lock-ins are, I'm not saying I won't do it, but it's coming to a close. Now, I can stay up to 2 or 3, but to go all night, I just don't do well with that anymore. Especially when you have a sleep machine. That just doesn't go well. And I don't think anybody wants me up here with that, that thing on during the lock-in. And I get that. But does that mean that the youth are not my responsibility at all? Is there something I can still do? Is there some way I can still help? And so while we all have different ways we can help, different talents and abilities, there's never a point where we've arrived. In talking to teachers sometimes, and they have evaluations. And Marcia, I know you love this, but every once in a while you have a teacher, so 5 is the highest, you score 5. And you'll get their evaluation back, and they'll have 5s marked on all, with 16 indicators. And I've been doing it for a while. I've seen some great lessons, but I have never seen a lesson that was the highest, in every category. It's not designed to be that way. There's still somewhere to improve. There's still somewhere to sharpen your skill. As Christians, we get one thing figured out. I'm doing pretty good with peace. I'm doing pretty good in different areas. Now what do I need to work on? What else can I help with? What else can I do to improve? Joshua 24, 13 through 38. Joshua here, the question comes up about putting the Israelites first. Obeying God or obeying the gods of this world. Ultimately, as long as Joshua's the leader, I'm not saying they don't make mistakes, but the people follow him. But after Joshua dies, one of the things, if you read, that it kind of faults Joshua for is it doesn't seem like he prepares a successor. Whereas Joshua became the leader after Moses, there's some turmoil after Joshua dies. And whether that was, if he just thought he was going to continue to live or didn't think about that. After he dies, Israel goes through some major issues. Right, yeah, and it took a little while, right. But they didn't really have a strong leader after he died for a while. One thing in the last few minutes I want to talk about, I think we need to recognize here that God brought us here. For 40 years, God leads the Israelites to the wilderness. They follow a pillar of cloud and fire. But think about all the things they see along the way. The Red Sea, the Jordan River, each place that they have to conquer, each thing they have to deal with. I think we need to be careful that we don't miss, in their case, the miracle, in our case, the blessings that we see. We can't get so busy, we can't get so focused that we don't see what God's doing right in front of us. And we can't miss those blessings. And it's easy for us to look and say, man, how did Israel not see? God's providing them manna every day. And they complain, so then God provides quail. And all the things that they're complaining about, well, why don't we just go back to Egypt? And it's easy for us to say and to judge them, but I think we do the same way, similar things sometimes, and we don't miss, and we miss the blessings God has laid in front of us. It's important to remember God's blessings. How often do the people have to be reminded of, hey, this is what God has done for us? What about us at Crosswinds? We're not as young as we once were. We're still young in many ways as far as the congregation. But what has God done? In 15 years, this building has been built and is almost paid off. All the people that have come through Crosswinds and the different people that have been helped, the different things that we've been able to do, are we proud of those? That doesn't mean we're done, but are we seeing those blessings? Are we seeing that God has done what he promised? Hebrews 13:5 says, God says, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. One of the things Joshua continually does is he obeys God's word. Are we doing the same? Are we staying in God's word? Joshua 1:8, we read earlier, do not let this book of the law depart from your mouth. Meditate on it day and night. Keep your focus on God. They had to decide whether to go in the river or not. Get your feet wet. Sometimes you got to step out there and do something maybe you haven't done before, help with something you haven't helped before, try to help in a different way. And then one of the things we didn't talk about because of time is they prepare a memorial in the river after they cross the Jordan River. They take 12 large rocks and they put in the middle of that, or they take them out of the river and then build a monument. And then that talks about taking their kids back to talk about this is what happened here. And I think it's important in our lives, not that we go get stones necessarily and build memorials, but that we talk about here's what God has done for our family. Here's what God has done for our church family. Here's how God helped us in this time. Here's how God brought me through this. And I think we need to be willing to share those things more in our lives. It looks like we're running out of time, but 5 quick things about Joshua and leadership. I love this one. How long, I think we forget this, was Joshua learning from Moses? 40 years. It takes time to develop leaders. Developing leaders is important in continual legacy. Again, one of the things that kind of is faulted with Joshua is does he prepare someone after him like Moses did? Are we preparing leaders to come after us? Are we training, maybe it's our own children, are we training them in leadership and serving? Doing the right thing and standing up for it is always best. Man, Joshua had to make some tough decisions, but it always, he always did his best to follow God. Are we doing the same? Keeping a positive attitude. 1 Corinthians 9:24, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Positive attitude is important in successful leadership. And then last of all, keep God first in everything. Sometimes it's hard to see. It's hard to understand God's instructions. It's hard to follow them. But are we keeping him first in all those decisions? And we just touched on Joshua. There's a lot in the book of Joshua and the character of Joshua. So hopefully you learned a little bit tonight. Thank you, guys.